Hey Esthers! Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in today's video, I am back with my mom and we are going to be doing part 3 of the teen dating series, discussing divorce and the importance of Christian friends and peer pressure. So let's get started.
So we're going to try to make it through 3 chapters.
Well, yeah, try.
If we can. And she let me wear my glasses, so hopefully I can see better this time.
Way to throw me under the bus. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to talk about divorce, which is actually a serious topic. It's not a funny thing. Now, I may throw out some of the data from this book, straight talk about teen dating, but I don't remember the year that it was written, so I'm not sure that these are the most current stats, and I didn't go back to confirm any of the statistics, so but we're just going to maybe share some of the ones that are in the book. But basically, the author talks about the how bad divorce is, and that a lot of people have this sense of, well, when they get married, well, it won't happen to me. But could it be that we don't know how many people's lives are affected by divorce? Now, again, he gives a number from 1970 to the year 2000, and 2000 was 23 years ago. But in 1970, there were about 4 million divorced people, and in the year 2000, there were 20 million divorced people. So it was 5 times as many people just in that 30-year period, and it would be curious. It'd be interesting to find out what it is now, which is 23 years later after that. So shockingly, 50% of all children will live with only one of their parents during their childhood, and this missing parent is usually the dad. 50% of all children, 50%. That's just an amazing number, and we wonder why the world is such a mess. And so this author really goes into what the effects of divorce are. And so here's just a list of some. We're going to try to, because it's so easy to get off on a lot of tangents, so we'll try to just really hit the highlights of the book and what he's talking about. But obviously there's stress, pain, shock, confusion, anger, grief, uncertainty when the marital relationship is dissolving, and the children suffer through some of those feelings. But there are also long-term effects to divorce. It's not just in the immediacy when the divorce is happening, but even long after the divorce occurs, there are effects of it. And the reason why he's bringing this up is because he's trying to motivate the reader to do dating right so that you don't end up like one of these statistics. So depression, children, and again, we're just taking his numbers at face value, and I don't know how old these statistics are. If anything, I would think maybe some of the statistics have worsened. But children of divorced parents are 7 times more likely to suffer from depression in adult life than people of similar age and background whose parents haven't divorced. And actually, they're more likely to be depressed from divorce than from the death of a parent. And you've experienced the death of a parent, and coming from a divorced home actually leads to depression as an adult more frequently than the death of a parent, which is amazing. Teens whose parents are divorced are more likely to drop out of high school, more likely to use drugs, more likely to commit suicide. This says about 60% of suicides are individuals from single parent families. More likely to have teenage pregnancies. About 70% of teenage pregnancies are from single parent homes. They're more likely to live together, or what I kind of call shacking up, meaning living together before they get married, or get married very young, and more likely to be divorced. If someone comes from parents who are divorced, they're twice as likely to get divorced themselves. 2 times as much, yeah. Now, of course, our media and the world have made, I don't know what you call it, but maybe normalized divorce in the sense that it's commonplace. It's considered okay. No big deal. If you fall out of love with someone or they're not meeting your needs, it's okay to divorce them. they're not treating it as a covenant made in front of God that is till death do us part. And so it's just, they make husbands and wives seem disposable. You're not happy? Go ahead and get a new one. It's okay. If they don't treat me right, if I don't get what I want out of my marriage, then I'll just get a divorce. But there's pain and heartbreak that comes from that, especially for the children. And death, I thought this was a really interesting comparison because I've not thought of it this way, but the author says that divorce is similar to death, except it's the death of a relationship. So everybody makes a big deal out of death, but so many people don't make a big deal out of divorce anymore. But divorce is the death of a relationship. And so even though the media tries to make it seem like, oh, there's good divorces where people are still amicable, they get along, it doesn't have any negative effects. There are always negative effects.
And one of those negative effects is, for children or a child whose parents have divorced, usually, their greatest wish is just for their parents to get back together.
Absolutely.
And I've heard so many stories about that, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, people don't realize how much the children would often, you see, even sometimes if the household is toxic, they still wish the parents could work it out and stay together.
Yeah.
And in Malachi chapter 2:16, the author says that, he quotes Malachi saying that God hates divorce. Not just that he dislikes it or doesn't want it, but he hates it. And we know that divorce was not how God made us from the beginning.
Right.
Moses permitted it in the Old Testament because of the hardness of people's hearts. So there was a selfishness behind it, and a stubbornness behind it. And that's why Moses permitted divorces, but that's not how God intended marriage to be. And of course that idea of, well, there's nothing I can do about it, that it's not true, that everything is possible with God. It's possible to keep marriages going.
Yeah.
But the main thing is that you don't even want to put yourself as a teen, you don't want to even put yourself in the position of facing a divorce later in life. And so that's really what this book is to talk about, is you don't want to become one of those statistics, and you need to be motivated to do whatever it takes to never be in that position of having a divorce. So we actually got to the end of a chapter. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, so one part in the chapter that stood out to me was the author was saying how only about 2% of high school sweethearts made it to, what was it?
50 years.
50
if they got
years.
married. High school sweethearts who got married.
Which is a really big milestone. But, I mean, for so long, I've always been like, oh, high school sweethearts, it sounds so sweet. It sounds so romantic. It sounds so, how awesome would that be to meet your soulmate when you're still in high school? And, I always thought that would be so neat to have. But in actuality, if my marriage doesn't last that long, I wouldn't want someone who's my high school sweetheart. I wouldn't want to marry them. I wouldn't want to commit my life to them. I'd want someone more stable, who's even a few years older, who has a career, who knows what they want to do in their life, who's following after God. And I just feel like high school sweetheart,
it sounds romantic.
yes.
But ultimately you have to pick someone who's a keeper, which is what we're going to talk about, making yourself a keeper and picking a keeper. And I think you can find them in high school.
Right.
But
there are those high school fairy tales.
Yeah, I think you can find them, but you definitely don't want to be making commitments in high school. You're too young at that point to really know. You have to mature, that other person has to mature. But chances are it's not that person that you have a crush on in high school.
Yeah.
Statistically, chances are it's not that person. Okay, so we're going to move on to the power of peers.
Yes.
So who do you think has a big influence on the behavior of many teens?
I would say God should be first.
Well, that was the point of the whole chapter. Thanks for cutting to the chase.
But definitely friends have a huge impact. But you need to, it matters who you run with.
Mm-hmm.
It really, your choices, what you end up doing with your life, it matters who you run with.
Well, and that's one of the things that the author argues is that typically peers influence teenage behavior more than God does, but that's backwards from how it should be.
Right.
And so then he talks about, well, why do peers influence more teens than God? And maybe it's because we see the peers every day, whereas God is invisible to us. We talk to our friends every day, and a lot of teens don't talk to God every day or aren't really comfortable in a prayer life with God. Maybe because we see our friends all the time, we put more effort into those relationships, and we don't really put that much effort into a relationship with God besides maybe just going to church. Peers give us feedback every day. You know, we're talking to them, and they're interacting with us and giving us positive and negative feedback. But unless you have a really good prayer walk with God where you're talking to him and you're hearing him back, then you may not feel like you're getting direct feedback from him. And so a lot of times people turn to their peers for the sense of acceptance. They want to feel that approval that comes from their peers, and they're afraid or fearful of rejection. So all these things may be a reason why teens tend to turn towards their peers for acceptance more than God. But ultimately, God has to be the closest relationship in our lives. And I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about this author, is that he's not saying that teen relationships aren't important with your peers, but that they're usually first, and they can't be. If you want to be a keeper, God has to be first. And that can't just be, oh, I know, Jesus comes first. It can't just be a principle or a great idea. You actually have to tangibly make it happen in your life. And so one of the things he says is a turning point for people is when they decide to allow God to be in control of their lives on a daily basis, instead of the peers and instead of themselves. I mean, a lot of us, we want to control ourselves, our daily lives. That's hard to give up that control. So either we want to control it, or we let our peers control or influence it. And ultimately, neither of those are going to be successful or effective. It has to be God first. But also, he does warn, once you finally make the decision and you start consciously working towards God being first in your life, it doesn't mean that it's automatically going to happen. It takes time, and there's trial and error. It's a gradual process to really trust God and have him be in control of your life on a daily basis. But over time, you'll reach a point where you'll try to do whatever you think God wants you to do in a situation, regardless of what your peers say or do or think. That if you believe you're pleasing God and you're doing what he wants, that is your guiding determination, and not what your peers say. And if you have experienced peer rejection, if a peer puts you down because you did what God thought you should do in a situation, and they put you down or make fun of you or something, don't worry about it, or don't make yourself angry or upset, because you have to think about whether or not they are a true peer or a true friend, if that's how they're treating you when you're really trying to put God first. None of your friends, none of them should ever be putting you down or making it more difficult for you to put God first.
Exactly.
And if they are, then obviously God is not first in their lives, but they should be encouraging your walk with God, not making fun of it or undermining it. So the question that they ask is, what do peers have to do with teen dating? And unfortunately, sometimes, I don't know if it's so much in our circles of church, because I think in our culture, there's less pressure than in the world. But still, there can be pressure from peers to date before teens are spiritually and emotionally ready. And so this peer pressure can be conscious and unconscious. They might kind of tease you or put you down because you don't like somebody or you don't have a boyfriend. maybe maybe it seems like all of your friends have one and you're kind of feeling left out because you don't have one.
It's okay to be single.
It is. So, but sometimes there's this tendency to feel like, you're inferior.
Yeah.
You're somehow inadequate because you don't have somebody and all your friends do. Or so you might want a boyfriend just to fit in. Or a lot of times this is how girls get their sense of self-esteem.
Yeah.
And this is another thing that sometimes happens as a result of divorce. If a girl doesn't have an active father or male figure in her life, that she'll sometimes want a boyfriend early because she wants that validation. She wants that attention and to feel loved. But she looks for it in the wrong places.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to skip one chapter. So then we do have a need for friends, but they need to be Christian friends. And these are friends who will encourage you. They'll help you through the ups and downs. They'll celebrate with you. And ultimately, they help you have a closer relationship with Jesus Christ. They help you stay focused, living for God in your daily walk. And they help you resist the negative kinds of peer pressure. And they'll give you wise counsel, meaning that if you do consult with them, they're helping you live according to what the church teaches, which are based on biblical principles. And so one of the things this author mentions, I'll just say this as an aside, is that he does mention that it's okay to have friends who aren't Christians or who aren't apostolic. They don't necessarily aren't Bible believing the way you are. But you need to be cautious about that. I mean, we want to help introduce people to Jesus and show them how amazing it is to live for God. So hopefully, if you do have friends that aren't in church, you are the influence on them and not vice versa. So that's what you want to be careful with, because people tend to become just like who they hang around. And so it's okay to be with people or be around people who don't live for God, as long as you are influencing them and showing them redemptive lift, as opposed to them pulling you down into being more worldly or carnal. And so when you are looking for a friend, he gives a good list of what a real friend is. So I'll just kind of mention or do you want to read these really quickly?
Okay, sure.
So it's the blue ones right there. So what is a real friend? What do they do?
A real friend allows you to be yourself, really listens to you, and doesn't share what's been said.
Well, now that's important, huh? You don't need to be talking about things that a friend has shared with you.
Right.
Yeah.
If something's shared in confidence, don't go behind their back and tell the rest of the friend group, like, oh, guess what she said.
Mm-hmm.
You'll most likely lose the friendship, and you don't want that. Can be trusted, supports and helps you, treats you with respect, sticks with you when other people abandon you, keeps their word. You want someone who is trustworthy. They're not trustworthy. It's sad to say, but the friendship is pretty superficial. You can't really become make a deep bond with that person, because you have to know that whatever you tell them could be spread anywhere to anyone. So you can never trust them, give them, say anything to them in confidence, which is really sad.
But a true friend you can.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, if you don't have trust,
you don't have anything.
Yeah.
Encourages you to make a good choice, even when others are encouraging you to make a bad choice. Tells you what you need to hear, even when you don't want to hear it. And that's really what a true friend does. They give you their honest opinion with love. They're not belittling you. They're not saying it sarcastically. They love you and they want to help you. And their honest opinion is very important.
But I would also say that their honest opinion is being said for constructive things.
Yes.
Not to tear you down,
right,
but to help you be better and to help you become in a godly way.
Yes.
Sometimes people will say mean things and say, I'm just being honest.
Right.
That's not being a friend.
Right.
If it's just mean, whether it's true or not, you need to, I mean, a true friend is providing it constructively to help you become.
Helps you to calm yourself down after you've made yourself angry. Comes and talks with you as soon as possible when there's a problem in the friendship. Is willing to forgive you when you mess up.
Because we all mess up.
Yeah. We all need forgiveness.
We all need some grace. Yeah.
Understands that friendships can change over time and can accept those changes after talking it out.
Yeah, if you look back even just over the last few years, your friend groups,
has just changed a lot.
It changes, yeah, it morphs over time. Sometimes you'll be closer to someone and then you kind of drift away and then you come back closer again. It just shifts over time depending on your interests at that time and your activities. So I think this has been important. We're talking about one of the negatives of divorce because we don't want that to happen. So that's so important in thinking of teen dating. You want to prevent putting yourself in a position where you might fall in love or get married to a person who's not a keeper. And then also talking about peer pressure. Peer pressure can lead people to make bad decisions. And so you want to make sure that you're surrounding yourself by good Christian friends who share your same biblical values.
A good friend group.
Yeah, and they're encouraging you to become who God wants you to be.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal.
And those are the chapters we're covering.
Yes. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you're enjoying the whole series so far. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications, and follow me on Instagram so you'll know when I post next. Bye!
Bye!